Good morning. I'm Katrina Lantos Swett, and I have the privilege of serving as the president of the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. And I want to thank each of you for being here today. As I began preparing my remarks for today, I found myself reflecting on the Lantos Prize ceremony of a year ago, when, as today, we honored two remarkable women, Evgenia Karamurza and Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya. We referred to them at the time as accidental human rights heroes because they had each been thrust into their roles as defenders of democracy and the rule of law because they were loving wives, determined to fight with all they had in them, not only to free their unjustly imprisoned husbands, but to carry on their work. Today, we again gather to honor two women who also might be considered accidental heroes, who did not seek out the brave and terrible tasks that they have shouldered, but who, when their beloved sons were taken hostage by brutal terrorists and put in the dungeons of hell, stepped forward and said, "Here am I, and I will fight with all that is in me to free my child." Last year's Lantos laureates both had improbable happy endings. Vladimir Karamurza was freed from Russian prison just weeks before the prize ceremony, and Sergei Tsikhanouskaya was freed from Belarus prison in June of this year. Sadly, we know that Diane and Rachel were not able to experience the joy of rescue and reunion with their sons in this life. But I believe that such a reunion will come. And yet, their stories, their lives, nonetheless, are an example to the rest of us of two mothers who have triumphed over evil and have found a way to make their tragedy into a blessing for many. How is this possible? I think Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel helps me to understand with his words when he wrote, "Our life can be the spelling of an answer to the questions that otherwise cannot be answered." It is not possible for you or for me to answer the terrible question of why evil came and took James Foley and Hersh Goldberg-Polin. But in the way that Diane and Rachel have responded, they have indeed spelled an answer of resilience and resolve that the rest of us can read. Just days after Jim's murder, Diane established the Foley Foundation, which advocates for American hostages and wrongful detainees held anywhere in the world. Diane has worked literally tirelessly with 4 different administrations now to prioritize the release of American hostages, and it has been largely as a result of her incredible efforts that the Office of the Special Envoy for Hostage Affairs was created. This vital infrastructure for freedom and rescue has been a game changer for hostages and their families. And it is a big part of the answer that Diane has written with her life. With the Foley Foundation's mission of inspiring moral courage, one person at a time, it has undertaken to advocate, to investigate, to research, and to educate. Diane has profoundly changed the way our government and increasingly governments around the world prioritize and fight for hostages and their families. Diane, with your inspiring faith, your heart that reaches beyond your own personal grief, your healer's art, because you were a family nurse for so many years before, you have indeed forever changed the landscape of hope for hostages and their families. You are a hero to the taken and the forgotten. When Rachel's son Hersh was kidnapped by Hamas in the horrific attack of October 7th, there was a real danger that the fate of 251 hostages would be pushed to the side, and that the imperatives of the war in Hamas, the war against Hamas, would overshadow the imperatives of the mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, wives and children of the hostages. In no small part, it was Rachel Goldberg-Polin's loving, passionate, charismatic, and unyielding advocacy that broke through the distraction of leaders and the disinterest of an uncaring world to insist that the release of the hostages be the foremost demand of the whole world. In many ways, this beautiful mother became the de facto leader of the movement to free every last hostage. And in no small part, due to her work, 168 of the 251 hostages were released alive. Tragically, her beloved son Hersh was not among them. Rachel, with your rare eloquence and your raw and powerful dignity, you made the fate of the hostages real and very personal to literally millions of people around the world. Like Queen Esther of old, you brought to this unsought role of leadership. You were brought to this unsought role of leadership for such a time as this. You know, we refer to these annual gatherings as Lantos Prize celebrations, and perhaps that word feels amiss given the sorrowful events that propelled our two honorees to become accidental human rights heroes. And yet, despite what Diane and Rachel have endured, they have both somehow been able to exude an incredible grace and light. It has been my privilege to know Diane Foley for a number of years. We're both from New Hampshire, the Granite State, and so our paths get to cross with a little bit of frequency. And anyone who has spent any time with Diane feels uplifted, inspired, but also happy. And your joyful sort of spirit radiates out to all of us. What a gift this has been to me and to so many others. Thank you for that, Diane. And Rachel has said so beautifully, and I'm going to quote, "I want to live the life that Hersh should have lived. And that's a life filled with love and happiness and light. We will always have this deep void, but I think that it is still possible to have that void and to be happy and choose life." Many years ago, before we all listened individually to books on our own set of headphones, I used to read books aloud to my 7 children, especially when we were on long family road trips. I remember one such trip over 25 years ago, wrapping up the final pages of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. You'll recall that many of the Harry Potter books end with Albus Dumbledore having a pretty important conversation with Harry, in which he shares answers, tries to provide answers to some of the most difficult questions that are indeed hard to resolve. In this particular talk, Dumbledore is explaining to Harry how and why he lived and about the special protection that he has. I'll confess, I got choked up when I read this to my children 25 years ago, and I may again. Dumbledore said, "Your mother died to save you." If there is one thing that Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. He didn't realize that love, as powerful as your mother's love for you, leaves its own mark, not a scar, not visible, but to have been loved so deeply, even though the person you loved is gone, will leave some protection forever. Diane Foley and Rachel Goldberg-Polin, despite their great, great love, might not have been able to prevent what happened to their sons. But I believe they nonetheless saved them. They saved their stories. They saved their light. They marked their sons with a kind of protection that evil cannot comprehend and cannot ultimately overcome. And through their love, they have helped save other sons and daughters. And they have saved all of our belief in the power and ultimate victory here and hereafter of love. Thank you very much.